In the Madlanga Commission, a judicial inquiry set up by President Cyril Ramaphosa to investigate allegations of corruption, political interference, and organized crime within the country's police and justice system. Chaired by retired Constitutional Court Justice Mbekezeli Madlanga, the Commission will hear from KwaZulu-Natal's province's police commissioner as its first witness, who is expected to detail how political leaders interfered in investigations into political killings. To help us unpack what this means for the rule of law and accountability, we're joined by Mbekezeli Benjamin, Research and Advocacy Officer at Judges Matter. Mbekezeli, thank you for joining us. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Asanda. Good morning to the listeners as well. I'm very well, thank you.
Great. So for those who may not know, why was the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry established and what makes it so significant for South Africa's justice system?
So the Madlanga Commission was set up by President Cyril Ramaphosa to investigate allegations that were made by a senior police officer in one of the provinces of South Africa, the KwaZulu-Natal. And basically he alleged that there are criminal syndicates who have infiltrated the criminal justice system in South Africa. They're working with police, they're working with prosecutors, they're working with people in the intelligence services and the metro police departments in some of the big cities like Pretoria and Johannesburg. And so the allegation is that these infiltrations have led to some of the investigations against crime and political killings in particular, for them not to progress, and for powerful of members of these criminal syndicates to not be prosecuted according to the law. And so the Commission of Inquiry is investigating these allegations that were made by the police officer, which is General Mkhwanazi, and it is also meant to look at a systemic overview of the criminal justice system and whether, in fact, such criminal infiltration happened and how can it be prevented in future.
Would you refer to this as South Africa's biggest corruption inquiry?
Look, South Africa has had a few inquiries over the last couple of years. The Zondo Commission was probably the biggest one involving corruption and state capture. However, the Madlanga Commission now is the first one to zoom in specifically on the criminal justice system. In the past, commissions of inquiry have investigated specific aspects, including the police during the Marikana massacre. There were certain investigations into the intelligence services quite early on, but this one is really the biggest one to look at the criminal justice system as a system, and particularly the infiltration of criminal elements. And that is significant because, as you know, South Africa is a global trading hub and also shares borders with several other African countries. And trade amongst all of these countries usually goes through some of these criminal syndicates. And so one does need to give a sense of to what extent there is this criminal infiltration and how can it be confronted in future, because ultimately it does affect other countries in the region in Southern Africa, but further afield, including to West and Eastern Africa.
So the hearings starting today are going to start with KwaZulu-Natal Province's Police Commissioner Madlanga Mkhwanazi as the first witness. What should South Africans expect on this day?
Well, look, today is the first official hearing, and so we would really be getting some of the background information relating to the allegations, because General Mkhwanazi made the allegations on the 6th of July, and since then there have been a number of events that have gone on in court, and there's been suspensions of senior police officers, and so he will give us some color as to exactly where these criminal syndicates come from. How did they come to infiltrate the criminal justice system? What extent are they working with police officers? And how are they also coordinating themselves? And how are they benefiting from the infiltration? So this is something that South Africans obviously have a vested interest in finding out, because it does involve quite prominent politicians. But for the rest of the continent, they also need to pay attention, because the criminal justice systems across Africa are intertwined. The judiciaries are related, especially in English-speaking Africa. We have a common judicial and legal tradition. And so there will ultimately be some impact on their own systems. And so there needs to be attention across the continent and a specific focus on the proceedings of the Commission of Inquiry.
As you mentioned, there have been other inquiries in terms of South Africa's law and corruption. So given the commissions that we've seen before in the country and the timeframes being extended, is the 147.9 million rands or $8.52 million US dollars for a 6-month period allocated to this commission sufficient?
Look, the commission has a lot of work to do. I mean, the institutions that are specifically named in the terms of reference include, like I said, the police, the intelligence services. In total, there are about 8 institutions that are named, and all of them are quite massive. It will require some time. It will require some effort. The $8.5 million that have been set aside for the commission is not change. It's not a small amount, but I suspect that there will be a bit more that needs to be spent because of just the extent of the interviews that still need. I mean, the investigations that still need to be undertaken.
Civil society groups, opposition political parties have criticized this allocation of this fund. They're saying it's high. How should the taxpayer view this fund allocation?
Well, look, the most important way to view this is to what extent is the criminal justice system the bedrock of economic development in South Africa? To what extent is the criminal justice system the system to protect victims of crime? And when you look at it from that perspective, what is the correct amount to put in protecting the criminal justice system? And I would argue that there is no expense that you would spend in order to ensure that your country lives under the rule of law and is stable and is able to grow. And so I think that it is a significant amount that is spent, but it is money that is going in a right direction. We do need to get to the bottom of what is happening in the criminal justice system, and particularly to prevent any corruption and criminal infiltration, because ultimately it does affect the economy, it does affect the regional economy and trade links amongst the different African countries that are connected to South Africa.
The commission is chaired by retired Constitutional Court Justice Mbekezeli Madlanga, as we mentioned in our introduction. What do we know of his judicial career and the kind of leadership and the style that we can expect from him in this leadership to bring to these hearings?
So Justice Madlanga is one of the smartest judges that we have in South Africa. He has a very long career in the judiciary. He was appointed as a judge when he was only 34 years old, which is highly unusual around the world, but particularly in South Africa. And since then, he has sort of quickly gone up the ranks in the judiciary. Within 5 years of him being appointed, he was already occupying quite senior roles in the judiciary. At some point in the early 2000s, he resigned as a judge and went back to private practice as a senior advocate. And even there, he distinguished himself in the kind of work that he did, the complexity of the cases that he handled. And he had actually previously been involved in similar inquiries, including one that looked at the revenue collection system, and he was able to recover 2 billion rands that would have gone overseas. And he also worked on as the evidence leader of the Madlanga Commission, which was investigating the massacre that happened with mine workers in 2012. So when you look at his career trajectory, he does seem to be a good fit in doing the work of this Commission of Inquiry. However, because of the complexities of it, I think he will be put under enormous pressure to get the investigation done at a reasonable time and also under budget. I think because that's the biggest concern among South Africans, that the time and the budget and the results of the inquiry.
Mbekezeli, we thank you so much again for your analysis.
Thank you very much.
Mbekezeli Benjamin is Research and Advocacy Officer at Judges Matter, sharing his insights on the start of the Madlanga Commission.